Everyone, welcome to my channel Size App. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to my videos. So this video will be dedicated to AWS WAF, which falls under the Security, Identity, and Compliance. So I wanted to talk about WAF because it's one of the most essential components, and I needed to dedicate an entire video to this. So let's get into it. So AWS WAF is a web application firewall that lets you monitor the HTTP and HTTPS requests. So one's a secure shell and the other one is just a regular HTTP that are forwarded to an Amazon CloudFront distribution, API gateway, or application load balancer. So you can only use WAF applications in either one of these three resources. AWS WAF also lets you control access to your content based on conditions that you specify, such as the IP addresses that requests originate from, or the values of query strings. An Amazon CloudFront distribution, an Amazon API Gateway API, or an application load balancer responds to requests either with a requested content or with a HTTP 403 status code, which is forbidden. You can also configure CloudFront to return a custom error page when a request is blocked. So let's understand or try to understand how a WAF works. So when you use AWS WAF to control how an Amazon CloudFront distribution, an Amazon API Gateway API, or an application load balancer responds to web requests. So you set up a web ACL. So you use a web access control list known as ACL to protect a set of AWS resources. You create a web ACL and define its protection strategy by adding rules. So these rules define the criteria for inspecting web requests and specify how to handle requests that match the criteria. You set a default action for the web ACL that indicates whether to block or allow through those requests that pass the rules inspections. Second, you have rules. So each rule contains a statement that defines the inspection criteria and an action to take if a web request meets the criteria. So when a web request meets the criteria, that's a match. So you can use rules to block matching requests or to allow matching requests through. You can also use rules just to count matching requests. Third is rules group. You can use rules individually or in a reusable rule group. So AWS Managed Rules and AWS Marketplace sellers provide managed rule groups for your use. You can also define your own rules, and that's what I usually recommend doing. So after you create your web ACL, you can associate it with one or more AWS resources. The resource types that you can protect using WAF web ACLs are CloudFront distributions, API gateway APIs, and application load balancers. So AWS WAF is available in regions listed in the AWS regions and endpoints. So for an API gateway API or an application load balancer, you can use any of the regions in that list. But for CloudFront distribution, it's a little different. So for WAF is only available globally for CloudFront, but when you create AWS resource for use with CloudFront, you must choose the US East North Virginia. So AWS WAF resources are web ACLs, rule group, IP sets, regex pattern sets. So what regex pattern sets are, I will get into in another video. So that's coming up. So AWS WAF Web ACL Capacity Unit, known as WCU, is another essential component you should know. So WAF uses ACL capacity units to calculate and control the operating resources that are used to run your rules, rule groups, and web ACLs. So AWS WAF calculates capacity differently for each rule type to reflect each rule's relative cost. Simple rules that cost little to run use fewer WCUs than more complex rules that use less processing power. So AWS WAF manages capacity for rules, rule groups, and web ACLs, as mentioned. So for rule capacity, for AWS, WAF calculates rule capacity when you create or update a rule. For some basic guidelines for rule capacity requirements, you can see the listings for the various rule statements at AWS WAF rule statements document, and I will link that in the comments below. You can also get an idea of the capacity required for the various rule types in the AWS WAF console by creating a web ACL or rule group and adding individual rules to it. The console displays the capacity units used as you add the rules. Second, rule group capacity. AWS WAF requires that each rule group is assigned an immutable capacity at creation. This is true for managed rule groups and rule groups that you create through AWS WAF. When you modify a rule group, your changes must keep the rule group's WCU within its limit. This ensures that web ACLs that are using the rule group remain within their limits. Then you have the web ACL capacity. The maximum capacity for a web ACL is 1,500, which is usually sufficient for most use cases. But if you need more, you can always contact the support center to extend it. So with AWS WAF pricing, with AWS WAF, you pay only for the web ACLs and rule groups that you create and for the number of HTTP or HTTPS requests that AWS WAF inspects. You can also look at pricing to understand a little bit more. So for today's video, that's it. I know it's a short clip, but I hope it helps you understand WAF a little bit better. Please do remember that WAF is mostly used, it's only used for CloudFront distribution, API Gateway API, or Load Balancer. API Gateway API and Load Balancer in terms of regions functions very similarly, but when you are using it with CloudFront distribution, although it's available globally, you must choose the US East North Virginia region. Please like, comment, and subscribe to my videos, and that's everything for today. Bye.